You're watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanova, and let's take a look at today's top stories. An armed man was shot dead by U.S. Secret Service near Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will increase his new global tariffs to 15%. And at least one person was killed and 5 others injured in overnight Russian attacks on Ukraine. An armed man was shot and killed after entering the secure perimeter of Mar-a-Lago, the Florida residence of U.S. President Donald Trump, the U.S. Secret Service said on Sunday. According to officials, agents observed the individual near the north gate of the Palm Beach property, carrying what appeared to be a shotgun and a fuel can. The man allegedly breached the secured area, prompting agents to respond. He was fatally shot at the scene. Donald Trump was not at the estate during the incident. He was in Washington at the time, along with First Lady Melania Trump. Investigators said the suspect was a man in his early 20s from North Carolina. Authorities have not yet released his identity, and the investigation remains ongoing. U.S. President Donald Trump has raised a temporary tariff on imports to 15% just a day after the Supreme Court struck down his previous trade program.
U.S. President Donald Trump has increased a temporary tariff on all U.S. imports from 10 to 15%, the highest level allowed under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act. The decision came less than 24 hours after the Supreme Court ruled that he had exceeded his authority by imposing sweeping global tariffs under a 1977 emergency powers law. In a 6-3 decision, the justices said the International Emergency Economic Powers Act did not grant the president the powers he claimed. In response, Trump turned to a different and largely untested law that allows tariffs of up to 15% for 150 days, unless Congress votes to extend them. The White House says certain goods, including critical minerals, metals, and energy products, are exempt. The decision has also created confusion over existing trade agreements. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said countries that negotiated higher tariff deals must honor them. Exports from Malaysia, Cambodia, and Indonesia will continue to face agreed rates of 19%, even though the universal rate is lower.
Nothing changes where they'll be paying tariffs, and we will not be paying tariffs. Our deal with India is they pay tariffs. This is a reversal from what it used to be, as you know.
Earlier, some countries welcomed the court's ruling. French President Emmanuel Macron said it showed the strength of democratic checks and balances.
We shouldn't go too fast either, because I note that President Trump, after a few hours, said he had revised the measures to introduce new tariffs, but this time more limited and for everyone. So we will see. We will look exactly at the consequences, what can be done, and we will adapt.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz warned that continued uncertainty over tariffs is damaging for both Europe and the United States. In London, the government said it expects its privileged trading position to continue, although business leaders warned the higher rate could hurt British firms. And South Korea convened an emergency meeting to assess the impact.
Economists warn the latest U.S. tariff shift could have wider consequences for prices, growth, and global supply chains. Experts say uncertainty alone may weigh heavily on businesses and consumers.
Economists say the latest changes to U.S. trade policy risk feeding inflation and slowing growth at the same time.
What it means is essentially twofold. The first thing is that prices will be higher. The cost of importing goods from these countries will be higher. So that is likely to be passed on to consumers in some way. And the other thing is that we're likely to see weaker activity as a result of it as well. So we're going to have weaker growth, and we're also going to see higher prices, which are likely to translate into higher interest rates and otherwise as well. So overall, there will be a negative effect from all these avenues.
Uncertainty is now a key risk. Companies that believed trade frameworks offered stability may delay investment or expansion plans. US President Donald Trump argues tariffs are needed to shrink the trade deficit, the gap between imports and exports. But US government data shows the deficit has widened to roughly $1.2 trillion, up 2.1% compared with last year. Trade between the United States, Mexico and Canada alone amounts to around $1.5 trillion in imports and roughly $1 trillion in exports each year. Supply chains are deeply integrated, particularly in the automotive sector, where parts can cross borders multiple times before a vehicle is finished.
You know, American consumers would face higher prices from tariffs, but also if you're an exporter, if you're a small business that sends products abroad, you're going to face foreign retaliation. And on top of that, right, like the US, Mexico, and Canada have pretty tightly integrated supply chains. So the average car made in the US or in the Mexico, Canada, US zone tends to travel across borders up to 8 times. And so if you're imposing a tariff of 25% each time a part comes across the border, or if the whole automobile crosses the border, it's going to get pretty costly pretty quickly.
The Supreme Court ruling has also opened the door for businesses to seek refunds for earlier tariffs collected under the invalidated law. Retail and business groups say reimbursements could provide an economic boost, particularly for small importers, though any repayment process may involve lengthy legal battles. Meanwhile, corporate disclosures tracked by Reuters show companies across Asia-Pacific have already reported financial losses, supply shifts, and market withdrawals as tariffs escalated over the past year.
Demonstrators gathered in Washington, D.C. on Saturday ahead of the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Supporters of Ukraine made near the Lincoln Memorial for a rally that featured speakers and performers. Among them was the European Union's ambassador to the United States, who said it was painful to return for a 4th year while the war continues. After the rally, demonstrators marched through the streets of Washington to the residence of the Russian ambassador. At least 1 person was killed and 5 others injured in overnight Russian attacks on Ukraine. Kiev says Russia launched 50 missiles and nearly 300 drones. The Air Force says most were shot down or neutralized. In the Kiev region, more than a dozen houses were damaged across several districts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Moscow is investing more in strikes than in diplomacy. There was an immediate comment from Russia. The attacks come as the United States continues efforts to broker a peace deal. But talks have stalled over Russia's demands for Ukrainian territory in the east, a proposal Kiev has rejected. As the war in Ukraine approaches its 5th year, fighting in the east of the country remains intense. In the Donetsk region, towns close to the front line continue to face daily attacks from drones and guided bombs.
The war in Ukraine is about to enter its 5th year. The fighting affects the whole country, but the east has suffered the most. In the Donetsk region, near the town of Bilozerske, much of the area lies in ruins after months of drone and guided bomb strikes. Just 14 kilometers from the front line, residential buildings are gutted. Cars lie wrecked in courtyards. Personal belongings are scattered across shattered stairwells. Once home to around 11,000 people, Bilozerske now has only about 1,000 residents left. Those who remain are trying to survive in damaged homes and constant danger.
Well, it's not too bad indoors. I use the cats as a guide. If they start running around the house, that means the drones are flying. We try to get out quickly, do our shopping, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's calm again.
Despite harsh weather and continued Russian attacks on power supplies, many residents remain determined to stay. Locals say the biggest problem right now is water.
Everything is fine. The main thing is that there is water. There is power too, but sometimes it gets cut off. Otherwise, everything is normal. There is bread, there is sausage, meat is delivered to the store, and people bring milk to the market.
As the war moves into its 5th year, towns like Bilozerske stand as a stark reminder of the human cost of a conflict. The Donetsk region is now at the center of a US-backed push for peace. Russia is demanding that Ukraine give up the remaining 20% of the region it does not control. Kyiv has firmly rejected that demand.
Iran has pushed back against threats by US President Donald Trump to strike the Middle Eastern country. President Masoud Pezeshkian has rejected external pressure amid ongoing nuclear talks.
Following US President Donald Trump's threat to carry out limited military strikes on Iran, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has said the country will not bow to external pressure from Washington. Pezeshkian said the Iranian people would never yield to what he described as bullying and coercion, as Trump seeks to influence ongoing nuclear talks with the Islamic Republic.
Mr. President, what's your message to the Iranian people after 2 rounds of talks with them? Do you have any message to the Iranian people?
The Iranian people in Iran or
Yeah.
people here?
People in Iran.
They better negotiate a fair deal. They better negotiate. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very, very sad situation.
Trump's remarks come as US warships have been deployed near Iran. Analysts say the continued pressure and military build-up by the United States in the Middle East during nuclear negotiations suggest Washington's strategy may be aimed more at securing domestic political support than at resolving disputes. On Thursday, Iran and Russia conducted joint naval exercises in the Sea of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean. Naval authorities said the drills were intended to promote security and sustainable maritime cooperation. Meanwhile, protesters from several universities in Tehran have taken to the streets on Saturday to mark the 40th day of mourning for those killed in recent nationwide demonstrations. In January, Iranian authorities suppressed widespread anti-government protests with deadly force, leaving thousands dead across the country. It is not immediately clear whether any demonstrators have been detained during the latest rallies, but officials say 27 people, including 5 faculty members and 22 students, have been killed as the protests turned violent. Large gatherings were also reported elsewhere later in the day, with calls for further protests on Sunday.
The Olympic flame is set to be extinguished as the 2026 Olympic Winter Games come to an end on Sunday. Cauldrons have burned in co-host cities Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo since the Games opened on February the 6th.
Cortina d'Ampezzo woke on Sunday to the final day of the Winter Games, with the Olympic flame in its town centre cauldron set to be extinguished later that evening. The town, nestled in the Dolomites, has hosted women's alpine skiing, curling, and the sliding events of bobsleigh, skeleton, and luge. Visitors have travelled from around the world to support speed skaters before heading into the mountains for the curling gold medal match.
So I'm from Canada, and we are a group of friends watching some of our friends compete in speed skating. And now we're in Cortina watching the curling gold medal game, and we love the Olympics, we love sports, and we're very happy to be here. And just got to Cortina, but it's beautiful, it's a nice day, and excited to watch some curling, excited to watch the Canada men's team win the gold medal game in hockey.
Well, we love Italy, we love the Olympics, and we thought Cortina would be a fun place to come as a family to enjoy the Olympics, so we're here for the bobsled event.
Cauldrons have burned in co-host cities Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo since the Games opened on February 6th. They will be extinguished on Sunday at the end of the closing ceremony in Verona before being reignited for the Paralympics, which run from March 6th to 15th.
And now we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Pakistan has carried out overnight airstrikes inside Afghanistan, with the Taliban saying civilians were killed. Islamabad insists it targeted militant camps linked to recent suicide attacks in Pakistan.
Pakistan says it launched intelligence-based strikes on 7 alleged militant camps near the Afghan border, describing them as a retributive response to recent suicide bombings, including attacks during Ramadan. Afghanistan's ruling Taliban says the strikes hit civilian homes in Nangarhar and Paktika provinces, killing at least 18 people, among them women and children.
Last night in Nangarhar province, in Behsood district, at 12 a.m., enemy Punjabi aircraft bombed us. As a result, civilians, including women, children and elderly people, were martyred with great cruelty during this month of Ramadan. This was a crime. Last night it felt as if Judgment Day had passed over us.
Our demand is that there must be an investigation, because this is not the first time. During the Republican period, the Americans used to attack us, and now they are doing it. A Pakistani aircraft came and carried out the attack.
Local Taliban officials say most of the deaths occurred in a single extended family. In Paktika province, a guest house and a religious school were also hit. Islamabad accuses Kabul of failing to act against militants from Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan and Islamic State Khorasan province, groups it says are operating from Afghan soil. It says it has evidence linking recent attacks in Pakistan to leadership figures based across the border. The strikes mark a sharp escalation in tensions, just months after the two sides agreed to a fragile ceasefire following deadly border clashes.
Standard & Poor's Global Ratings has upgraded Armenia's outlook to positive, citing stronger security and improving regional connectivity, as diplomatic progress with Azerbaijan improves regional stability.
A new report by S&P Global Ratings highlights improvements in regional connectivity driven by ongoing efforts to normalize Azerbaijan-Armenia relations. The Washington meeting in August 2025 is credited with stabilizing the security environment and reducing the risk of renewed conflict. Consequently, the agency has revised Armenia's outlook to positive from stable, citing improved security and resilient medium-term performance. It adds that further diplomatic progress could strengthen fiscal and external positions, though setbacks or disruptions could weigh on growth. Meanwhile, the report by S&P Global Ratings affirms Armenia's sovereign credit ratings at BB-/B. S&P projects Armenia's economy to grow around 5% annually between 2026 and 2029, supported by resilient domestic demand, private investment and a strong labour market. Fiscal consolidation is progressing, with government debt remaining moderate and the banking sector well capitalised and profitable. The report also notes that Armenia's ties with Russia remain complex. Political relations have cooled since 2023, but the country continues to rely heavily on Russian trade, energy and financial flows.
Meanwhile, Russia's economy is also far from being in a perfect shape. Restaurant margins are shrinking and rising costs are forcing closures across Russia, even in Moscow. Owners say January closures are normal after the busy holiday season, but many worry the industry is becoming too risky for small profits.
Restaurants and cafes in Russia are closing at the fastest rate since the start of the Ukraine war. Even in wealthy areas of Moscow, spending is falling. Closures are seen from the capital to Vladivostok and signal a slowdown in the $2.8 trillion economy.
Years ago, people said a restaurant should have a margin of 20 to 25%. After the pandemic, the benchmark became 15%, and that was considered good. Today, many places operate with only a few percent. Many owners would not even start this business now if they could choose again. It would be easier to put the money in a bank and earn returns there instead of taking constant risks for minimal margins.
At a cafe in southwestern Moscow, cake and pastry shelves are empty and the espresso machine is silent. Owner Yekaterina Oreshkina said they did not expect such a downturn. A slow January, a 50% rise in ingredient prices, high rent and taxes forced her to close this branch, though her other cafes remain open.
Every year in January, restaurants close. Why? Because the last quarter of the year is the peak season for the industry. October, November, and especially December are when restaurants make money. If someone decides to shut down, they usually do it in January. So this is completely logical, nothing new. It happens every year. As for the number of restaurants that closed in Moscow, there is always a balance between closures and openings. In 2025, there were still more openings than closures. For now, I don't see anything catastrophic.
As expenses climb and profit margins decrease, more businesses may struggle to stay afloat as the industry is facing another year full of uncertainty.
Turkey has signaled its readiness to train police, rebuild the health and education sectors, and contribute troops as part of Gaza's reconstruction. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan made the commitments at the inaugural meeting of U.S. President Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Washington, D.C. on Thursday.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said Turkey is ready to assist in the rehabilitation of Gaza's health and education sectors and help train police forces in the embattled Palestinian territory. Fidan made the remarks in Washington at the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace chaired by U.S. President Donald Trump. He stressed Ankara's continued support for U.S.-led peace efforts and stated that Turkey was prepared to provide troops for a proposed international stabilization force for Gaza. According to Fidan, the ceasefire in Gaza was achieved after 2 years of human suffering, crediting what he described as President Trump's personal engagement and collective diplomatic efforts for the breakthrough. But he went on to warn that Gaza's humanitarian situation remained fragile and that ceasefire violations continue to occur, calling for a prompt, coordinated, and effective international response.
Our message is this: whether it's humanitarian aid, the administration of Gaza, infrastructure and superstructure services, or contributing to international stabilization force, we are ready to provide all kinds of support in all these areas.
Several other countries have already pledged to send troops for the proposed stabilization force, including Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, and Albania. The initiative is aimed at ensuring security, stability, and reconstruction efforts in Gaza following the conflict in which tens of thousands of people in Gaza have been killed. While in Washington, Fidan also reiterated Turkey's hope that the United States would pursue what he described as genuine negotiations with Iran. He added that diplomatic engagement would help avert the need for a military operation or broader war in an already volatile Middle East region. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
In Turkey's Hakkari province, heavy snowfall and strong winds have created rare snow waves on mountain slopes, attracting nature enthusiasts and photographers. The undulating patterns shaped by persistent winds resemble desert sand dunes and offer a striking natural spectacle.
In Turkey's southeastern Hakkari province, rare snow waves have drawn the attention of nature enthusiasts. Heavy snowfall last week saw snow depths reach up to 2 meters in parts of the high-altitude Durankaya district. Strong winds near Yeni Mahalle sculpted the snow into undulating patterns on the mountain slopes. Nature lovers and photographers visited the area to view and capture the unusual formations, which were also recorded in drone footage. Experts say the phenomenon occurs when persistent strong winds shape the snow into parallel ridges and troughs, similar to sand dunes in desert environments.
That's all we have for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.